Dr. Chris Ryan. What's up, my friend?
Not much. How's it going?
It's going pretty good,
It's
man.
good to be here.
Yeah.
At your little home away from home.
I know, right? Little studio here we got set up. So, man, it's been a long time since you've been on the podcast. And I owe you so many fuck yous and thank yous.
Fuck yous and thank yous.
Yeah.
That's
and
great.
I figured
they go together.
I figured like you're one of the people who probably gets more of both of those than anything. Because your book, Sex at Dawn, it either elicits one or the other. Like you don't really get a lot of, oh yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah.
It's kind of like fuck you or thank you.
Yeah, not many fuck yous, honestly.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I would say it's 95-5 probably the ratio.
Not bad.
And the thank yous range from thank you, really enjoyed the book, to my favorite is the women, many women who have written and said, I had to stop and masturbate every 10 pages. I mean, that's the best thank you any author will ever receive. I think.
That will never happen with any of my books.
Not a single dude. Not a single dude has written to me to say, "Hey, dude, I had to stop and jerk off while I was reading your book."
I just get shirtless.
But women do.
I just get shirtless men sending me DMs of their abs. That's what I get after my book.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah,
You're sort of asking for it, though.
That's pretty much what I get. But the reason I'm sending you both of those is that was the time when I realized that female sexual biology is not that different. At least similar in the impulse to mate with multiple partners. And I had it all backwards. And that's what got me on this open relationship journey, which has led to, of course, many beautiful times and many challenging times. But if it wasn't for that book, I don't think I ever would have understood what was going on between the brain-pussy connection of women. And I think that's probably the case for a lot of people, and probably why females are so excited. They're like, oh shit, someone's describing what's actually going on, what my urges, impulses, feelings, thoughts, these things that were supposed to be shameful and not allowed and not approved. This is what's actually happening.
I think you're right. I think there's a sense of, I don't want to say justification, but recognition. I think a lot of women feel recognized by the book, which is largely due to Casilda, my co-author, having been involved and sort of pulling me back from some of my male biases in some parts of the book, I think. But also I find it really interesting how a woman's sense of feeling recognized can have such an erotic charge to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That just feeling seen can be a huge turn on for women.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it works that way for men. Maybe
it's certainly
just
an amazing feeling, right? Like there's almost for your soul and your heart, but I don't know if it translates to the dick the same way.
That's what I'm thinking.
You know
it might even be a bit of a buzzkill, dick-wise.
No. Can we just hold each other? Can we just love each other and
let's
talk?
cuddle. Yeah. We've missed the moment.
And maybe that is something due to the repression. I think people have understood male sexuality more, and so maybe it's not like, oh my God, they see this taboo thing and it's actually okay. And then it allows them to actually think those thoughts. And maybe it's the permission of it that makes it sexy. Because you talk, female copulatory vocalization. The reason why women are louder in bed is to alert other males, because when they're having sex, they're ready. And then other males could come and continue to have sex. And this was this kind of what you would call in porn, like a gangbang scenario, which is like part of the history of sexual biology for fucking humans.
Right. Well, it's pretty clear based on the evidence that we put together in Sex at Dawn that our ancestors evolved in the context of sperm competition. So yeah, it would be typical for more than one male to have had sex with any female. And what else are you going to do around a fire for 100,000 years?
I don't know. I mean, play a didgeridoo.
Play didgeridoo. That's about it.
Either that or like multiple guy on girl sex. I guess one or the other.
But before people get the wrong idea, I mean, there are some parallels to gangbang porn. And we talked about that in the book, how gangbang porn is incredibly popular among straight men, which doesn't make sense.
Yeah, because there's just dicks everywhere.
Right, there's dicks everywhere. And why would guys get turned on by all those dicks and one woman and all that jism flying around? It doesn't really make sense based upon a sort of narrow reading of heterosexuality. But before people get the idea that, we're saying that all our ancestors were porn stars, people evolved in these groups of these sort of bands of hunter-gatherers that were very intimate. So it's not like there were strangers and,
Right.
people getting fucked by someone they'd never met before.
No.
We're not talking about
The tribes
that.
were still fighting each other, and it was a very different, typically, or sometimes in cooperation.
This is where you and Rogan and I differ on the prehistory.
right.
Rogan's very wedded to the,
Dark side of tribalism.
Nature's a cruel bitch and all that. I don't buy that.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly examples of both, right? Like you
Of
can
course
look at
there
the
are.
Plains Indians, and they were
Yeah.
sometimes getting along and sometimes kicking each other's ass.
Also, but see, it's very complicated to talk about this stuff because Plains Indians, let's take as an example, we're looking at horses. There were no horses in North America until the Spanish came. All the horses that you see, the Comanche and the, the Cheyenne, all those societies are totally transformed by the introduction of the horse. So when we look at them, we're not looking at them in their sort of pristine environment, behaving the way they'd behaved for centuries.
The horse was a disruptive force.
Hugely disruptive.
Sure,
Right.
makes
I mean,
sense.
look how important it was central to their societies. They were hunting buffalo from horses. They were waging war on horse. They were ranging over the plains, which they couldn't have done without horses.
So did that allow them to boost their population because they could hunt farther? And then with the population, there became a scarcity of resources. With the scarcity of resources, there became conflict.
Right. Yeah. You're expanding, right?
Yeah.
Anytime you're in a ecological condition in which your population's expanding rapidly, you're going to come into conflict with neighboring groups, right? But the other factor that's important to consider when we're looking at accounts of North American native people is that up to 80% of them were killed by smallpox, which also spread across the continent before they ever saw any white people. So when we're looking at accounts of fur trappers or missionaries or the first sort of settlers talking about what they saw in the behavior of these people, we have to keep in mind that these are people whose populations were decimated 100 or 150 years earlier by this wave of smallpox that came through and just wiped out 80% of the people, and then whose worlds were upended by the introduction of the horse when we're talking about Plains Indians, which moved some groups out of the forest onto the plains and, brought them into conflict with people they'd never seen before. So it was anything but sort of, coming and seeing the way they've lived until we showed up. It wasn't like that at all.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's a good distinction. Still, though, the neighboring tribe didn't get to fuck your women. probably they would have been like, hey,
not.
maybe
Yeah.
it wouldn't have been like warlike,
Well,
but they wouldn't have been invited to the gangbang. Most likely.
Although there are lots of accounts of social events where tribes would get together and they
Like a
would
powwow,
have sex with each other. Yeah. Potlatch ceremonies. Yeah. And it still happens today. And
Sure.
I have a friend who hiked across Madagascar and there was no road. There's a mountain range that runs down the spine of Madagascar, and he hiked, I think, from the west side up over the mountains down to the east side. And he said that every village he came to, all the young unmarried women would try to get him to spend the night with them because it would be a great honor. And, that's how they treated travelers who came through. Like, you got to sleep with the young woman that you wanted to.
And the word Eskimo brothers comes from that tradition with the Eskimo people, but they would actually be sleeping with the chief's wife, right? Like a guest of honor would sleep with the chief's wife. Is that what kind of like?
Yeah, but that's because the chief's bed was the most comfortable generally and the warmest.
How polite.
Yeah,
that's a fucking host.
Yeah.
Hey, come stay at my place. Fuck my wife. Sleep in my bed.
Yeah.
You want some whale blubber? Like, what can I do for you?
Yeah.
What fucking sweeties they are.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about hospitality is the difference between life and death up there, right?
That's true.
You're trudging across the tundra.
Imagine you have that old school like scarcity mindset. And you're like, fuck, I hope I don't run into any Eskimos. And then you run into some Eskimos, like, shit, it's all going to go downhill from there.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, fast forward 4 hours later, you're feeding on whale bone broth and fucking the chief's wife. And you're like, this is amazing.
These people aren't so bad.
I'm going to be an Eskimo forever.
Yeah.
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 That's really interesting. So sorry. So to follow back to that initial thread,
Back to the fuck yous.
back to the fucking, like, I think just now having a group of girlfriends that now everything is, because I'm in an open relationship and we've collapsed a lot of the jealousy structures and collapsed a lot of the things. Like the truth about what is being expressed, what their urges are, what their feelings are. You know, I get to basically like be one of the girls at a girls' brunch where they don't hold back what they're talking about.
Right.
And girls and guys are equally savages. You know, and I think that's the moral of the story. Everybody likes to fuck. And everybody likes to fuck in like as big a way as you could possibly imagine. And typically that's the case. And there's nuances and subtleties in the motivation. And of course the ego gets involved and there's validation fucking and there's all kinds of complicated things. But I think to at least understand it's absolutely necessary to understand the basic biological impulses that we all have. And I don't think there's a better book that does that than your book.
Well, thank you, man.
Yeah.
I appreciate
So I just
that.
wanted to give you that appreciation. And then knowing that, then it's like, well, shit. You know, like I can't be in a situation where I would expect, because I think a lot of guys want to have a situation where they can have sex, but like, no, but my girl shouldn't want to even have sex because, you know, look at the lions. You know, there's one lion and a bunch of fucking lionesses. And look at bulls or whatever. They have these archaic animal model examples that are just not human beings. And that's why everybody's fucking cheating on everybody. Everybody's lying.
Yeah.
Is it just a failure to understand like, oh, this is the kind of animal that we're dealing with here?
Yeah. Failure is a nice way to put it. I think it often verges on refusal,
Yeah.
you know, and yeah, I mean, back to the fuck yous and the thank yous, the response to the book, not only from readers, but also from critics is interesting, you know, like, again, mostly really positive and we're very grateful for it. But when people trash it, they trash it hard. And it, you know, initially, I mean, I sort of girded my loins. I knew going out that this wasn't going to be pretty, you know, but I became very good at recognizing early on when the response was motivated by emotion and learning to ignore it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, for example, one of the first reviews of the book was Megan McArdle, she's a columnist for the Washington Post now. And at the time she was writing for the Atlantic, I think. And she wrote this thing, I think it was in her blog, but she just was like, this book is total bullshit. It's blah, blah, blah. Just like trash the writing style, the research, like everything, right? And she said, you know, how can you write a whole book questioning monogamy and not even mention jealousy? I'm like, chapter 10 is called jealousy. like, how do you publish an article that is that disconnected from reality? You know, it's like, it's a panic. You're in a panic. You're in a state of
Just a frenzy.
Yeah. Emotional frenzy. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. And I've learned to just not, it's like online shit, you know, it's just like, that's not about me. It's not even about the book. It's about you.
And that comes up even when I talk about open relationship, right? I mean,
Sure.
it's this thing like you make a post that mentions it and there'll be a strong emotional reaction both ways, you know?
So how do they deal with you though? Because I always get called like a beta cuck. You know, that's the way. Every time I'm on Rogan's show, I get all this like, "You baby's a fucking beta cuck." I'm like, yeah, I don't know, not sure, dude. I don't think so. But how do they do with you?
I
mean,
still
like,
get called a cuck. You know, I think that's
so
like
you're
the
an
insult.
alpha
That's
cuck?
I guess so.
Let me get a T-shirt for you, alpha cuck.
Alpha cuck. I guess that's the insult, right? That's the way to say this person is different.
Yeah.
And that's why they're into that, because it's fucking terrifying to them.
Well, I love
to
the
thought
words.
that their girl might want to fuck somebody else.
Yeah.
Guess what? They
when
do.
any guy who would let.
Yeah.
Who would let
Who would
his
let.
girl
Who would
do?
allow.
Yeah, like what do you mean let?
Yeah, like you fucking.
I didn't pick her up at the dog pound, you idiot. You know? And it goes the other way too. Like, you know, you're talking to a guy and like, oh, my wife would never let me. Like, your wife would never let you?
Yeah. Ew.
What kind of marriage is that?
What
kind
is
of
this
relationship?
weird? Yeah. What is this weird possessive thing that we've got ourselves into, where we just put more and more rules, just boxing people in tighter and tighter until they don't even resemble the wild creature that we first fell in love with, that actually gets us turned on in the first place. It's like, and when everybody's thinking about a fantasy of them riding a horse on the beach, is it some fucking beaten down, whipped fucking horse with a fucking bit in his mouth? Like, oh, don't hit me anymore. What do you want?
Should I canter or trot, honey?
No, they want a fucking wild stallion, right? Like, and we both want that. We want the fucking unicorn with the mane flowing and fucking cauliflower coming out of the fingertips. We want that, but we're terrified of it.
Yeah.
You know, so we try to control until we're just disgusted, and then we cheat with some other fucking wild stallion or unicorn.
Yeah. Because that's what turns us on.
That's what fucking turns us on. Yeah. We're actively working against ourselves because we're afraid to like face the dragon of our own jealousy and our own validation that we're getting from this person only fucking us. Well, I'm special because they're only fucking me. I'm worthy of love because they're the only ones who'll, you know, take their pants off for me. You know, like weird. Yeah. It's a weird time.
I've often, I mean, for me, it's transformed long ago, long before I wrote the book, into sort of what you were saying earlier about being one of the girls. Like where I get validation is when a woman will share things with me she's afraid to share with other dudes. That's what makes me feel special. And often what she's sharing is like, I'd like to fuck other dudes, or you know what I mean, or something like.
I'd like a triple penetration. I think
exactly.
About that.
I thought about fucking your buddies, and I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll talk to my buddies. But it's like that. That's how I deal with it. My Aikido move is like, I'm special because I'm the guy who's not threatened by that shit. Right. You know, and I would encourage other guys to adopt that posture because it's great. It just opens up the world to you.
That kind of confidence is like fucking fiery, sexy. You know, when you're just like, no, I'm not threatened by that.
Right.
You know, now if and you combine that with, but sweetie, if someone's trying to hurt you, I'll come after them. Right. You know, I'll be on them in a fucking second. But someone's trying to give you pleasure. Cool. Let me bless that situation. Let me send a bottle of champagne to your hotel room, not because I'm being a fucking sneaky about it, just because I want you guys to have a good time.
Yeah.
You know, and like that's at that point, the gratitude that comes from that is like, oh shit, this person really just wants me to be happy.
And you know what? It gets back to that earlier thing of this guy sees me.
Sees me. Exactly.
And the guy who sees you, I think, here are a couple of dudes talking about women. But in my experience, a woman who feels recognized and seen is a really happy woman.
Totally.
And that's the way you connect with her.
And
in
a
the
guy who
level.
feels recognized and seen is a really happy man. You know, I mean, and anytime you have to lie and pretend that you're not, you're going to build up resentment.
Right.
You know, and that's why like, with you gotta, people always say, oh yeah, I'm marrying my best friend. I'm like, you lying motherfucker. You were lying to each other constantly. Because when I hang out with you, it's a way different fucking conversation.
Yeah.
You know, like, sure, I don't doubt that there's a very special bond and you deeply care for each other and you've nurtured each other and there's vulnerabilities that you share. But nonetheless, like, that's your best friend. You tell the truth. You know, like you say, oh man, I met this girl and there's like a lot of attraction there, blah, blah, blah. Or met this guy, blah, whatever it is. Just like you would with your normal friends, like medium friends, you would still talk about that. But it's just until people, I think whether you decide to take action or not, like you got to be honest with each other and just recognize and see each other as humans. Now, it can be fucking super challenging, as I know, and really hard when you start to actually walk the path and have to deal with it. And I'm not saying that's for everybody, but I think the bare minimum is to get to an honest recognition of who each other are.
Right.
You know, and then willingly maybe sacrifice your ability to quench those desires physically. Like, that's fine. Like, both of you are like, look, I see you. I know you're a savage. I know you want to fuck. You see me. You know I'm a savage. You know I want to fuck. But you know what? It's going to be really challenging. We're going to have to wade through a lot of shit to do this. Yeah. We're not going to do this voluntarily.
Right.
But let's not delude ourselves about who we are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good that you sort of articulate that, because I think a lot of people misunderstand these sorts of conversations as being saying that open relationships are better, or if you're not in an open relationship, you're lying to yourself, or there's something wrong with you and all that. Like, that's Sex at Dawn has no advice, zero relationship advice. It's all exactly what you just said. This is the kind of animal we are. This is how we know that. these are the, signs of it in our bodies and our behavior and our history and other primates that are similar to us. What you do with that information is up to you, but start from a position of knowledge and acceptance, so that you understand that if you choose to go against that trajectory, that evolved trajectory, it's going to be challenging.
Yep.
And that's cool. And that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you.
And just do that with open eyes.
Right. Exactly.
And that's the thing.
And compassion for each other and for yourself.
Totally.
So, I mean, like relationships, also what is an open relationship, right? Like we're talking about a relationship where you're having sex with other people. But there are, Dan Savage has this term monogamish, right? The door's open a little and it can swing more open or closed over time. But, like couples who look at porn together, that's kind of an open relationship because they're acknowledging what turns them on. They're sharing that with each other. It's part of their shared space. It's not some shameful little thing that the dude goes down in the basement and does when the woman's in the shower. And, and so developing this sort of separate dark area in the relationship.
Widening the gap between the two people, from doing that.
And then pretending like, it's guys who look at porn. Sickos, honey. They're sickos.
I remember I watched a doctor flipping through the channels, and I just happened to flip through a Dr. Phil piece, and he goes, right when I flipped through, he goes, and he was giving advice to this woman, if he's beaten, he's probably cheating. I go, what? Did he say that? He's like, if he's beaten, he's probably. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about, Dr. Phil?
Yeah.
If a guy's beating off, he's probably cheating?
Yeah.
Are you saying that everybody's cheating off?
Yeah,
like everybody's cheating? Like what is the fucking point you're making here?
Yeah, Dr. Phil, if you're listening, you're full of shit. You've been full of shit since the beginning. Do you know, he's not even a psychologist. His PhD is in like statistics or something. And he met Oprah because he was helping her choose when she was being sued by the Beef Council because she said some shit about hamburgers being bad for you or something. As he was like the consultant to help the lawyers pick the jury pool. That's how she met him. Like he's zero training as a psychologist or a therapist. He's just a bullshit artist.
I mean, Oprah's probably done some positive things in the world, but this was a fucking strike. This was she just took a huge swing, spun around, and fell
ball, man.
Like just fell down.
Yeah,
that guy's fucking crazy. But you get this mainstream, really bad advice.
Am I going to get sued by Dr. Phil? Did I just destroy my entire future?
So. Yeah, I hope so. That'd be amazing.
Dr. Phil, you're full of shit, but please don't sue me.
I think like it's just an odd time because people are so scared of the truth. And like you can't be. You got to look at that shit unemotionally.
Yeah.
And just the fear around thinking that the system that you have there might be another way, because I think also people have like they've accepted the pain of marriage to a certain degree. Like they've accepted the pain that they're feeling, like, nope, this is just it. And then when they see somebody who's like, or not, or maybe it's hard and maybe it's not for you, but there's other ways that maybe you don't have to live in pain and it doesn't feel like a ball and chain, and the sex doesn't run out of passion, and like all of these things that you just like accept. There's other options if you want, and people are like, fuck you, no. There cannot be other options because I'm enduring this right now. And if I think there's other options, that thought will torture me endlessly. So I'm going to pretend that there's nothing else that works. And if you like it, you're a fucking beta cuck. Yeah. And like, if you're into it, you're just a freak and whatever, they just ostracize and make it not a real option.
Yeah.
Well, it's a real option. It's not a fucking easy option. I'll tell you that. It's fucking hard as shit.
It's a sunk cost fallacy. Is that what that thing's called? Where like if you've already lost a certain amount of money in something, you refuse to accept that it's a bad investment and you'll put the rest of your money in it.
Just keep pushing chips in.
Because acknowledging like you've already lost half your money to a bad investment, that hurts.
That's a good, I've never heard the term for it, but I think that happens with that type of investment. It also happens with people who've been wrong for a long time. Yeah. Like if you've been a dick for a long time, like it's really going to be hard for you to take psychedelics or something that might actually illuminate like, shit, like I've been doing something the wrong way for a long time. Like I've been an asshole to my kids for a long time. like the momentum of that, because then you have to forgive yourself for years of being a dick.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even just making a mistake. Like, here I am, I'm regional manager of the, the shoe chain, and I don't give a fuck about shoes, and I never have, but I'm 45 years old and I got to pay my mortgage. And like, I have a lot of compassion for somebody.
And I wish I would have made music, because that's that's what I always loved, and they just bury that.
Yeah.
And this idea that it's, instead of looking at now to the future, like how can I live the rest of my life from here? It's like that they don't even want to acknowledge that they would have made a mistake in the past, but fuck it. We all make mistakes. We all wake up, and realize like, oh shit, I was blind to this. I was dumb in this way. I mean, I'm constantly figuring out that I was a dummy in some way.
How old are you?
37.
Yeah. You're
it's like dummy. Fucking, yeah. In a shocking, like, not like a little bit.
You can't help it. You're 30.
No, not a little bit.
37 seemed old, and now it's like 37. Oh.
Kids these
days, millennials. Yeah. It's funny. I'm 56, and I think everything accelerates with age, as does that. I think the feeling of like, I don't know, like as your perspective is changing and everything looks different and things become apparent that were blocked before by testosterone or ambition or whatever. It's interesting. It's really interesting. Another thing, just before we leave that subject of relationships and how we shoot ourselves in the foot, there's, I don't know if you and I have ever talked about this, but there's this book I read a long time ago called The Erotic Mind by Jack Morin, I think. And I don't remember anything about the book except this formula that he lays out where he says, passion equals attraction plus an obstacle.
Ooh.
Isn't that great?
That's cool.
It's so simple, but it's so powerful, right? So you have two people are attracted to each other, but there's an obstacle. They're already married to other people. They're gay and they can't, that can't be admitted, or their families don't want them to get together, Romeo and Juliet, or it's a, long distance thing. She's in New York, you're in wherever you are. Like whatever it is, there's that obstacle, and that increases the passion. It's like this gravitational pull, and you can't close the circuit, right? And so when they do get together, it's super hot and fantastic and all, and they want, like, I want to have this all the time, man. I want to have this passion all the time.
So they split up with their spouses to get together, and they're like, fuck, no obstacle.
Where's the passion? This isn't like in the hotels that we used to get together in Cleveland. What the fuck?
That's really fucking interesting, because I've experienced that myself. There's been people who, I've had passion building for a while, and there's always been some obstacle. There with somebody. I've been in an open relationship for 4 years, so it's typically there with somebody else, and it's like, all right, and then they get single, and we're like, all right, we're gonna give this a go, and it's like all of this passion, and then it's cool, but it's like after we do it, we're like, now we can just chill and be friends again.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's like while the obstacle was there, it was this crazy thing. But when freedom was actually there and we actually were able to exercise it, and it was like, oh yeah, that was dope. You're awesome. Like, I enjoyed that. But actually, we're probably just better as friends.
Which makes you wonder about her breaking up with her guy in the first place. If the guy had been like, yeah, go fuck Aubrey, then maybe they'd still be together.
Right. And been like that with everybody. And that's one of the reasons why I'm still with Whit, and our relationship now is probably better than it's ever been. It's had its trials and tribulations and tough times, but we're able, if we have that thing that catches our eye, which used to cause me to break up with my girlfriend and be like, no, I'm going to, this fucking thing. I know I want this thing for sure. Well, now we just go experience that thing. And most of the time we find out like, oh no, what we have is actually doper.
Right.
And it just gives you that flexibility. It says bend, don't break kind of philosophy.
How do you deal with the other relationship? So like, let's say the woman isn't, her guy doesn't know.
If I'm with a girl whose guy doesn't know, I've never been in that situation. Whit's been in that situation. And that's always a little bit trickier.
Yeah.
It's a little bit trickier because the communication gets kind of fucking spotty, because there's usually if there's dishonesty on one side, there's usually dishonesty on both sides.
Yeah.
Like, so many people have, told her like, oh no, I'm in a don't ask, don't tell. I'm like, every time that's turned out to be total bullshit, which is basically, no, she didn't ask me about you, so I didn't tell her. Like, well, how the fuck would she know to ask you about her? You know, it's this don't ask, don't tell open relationship thing is fucking nonsense. I've never actually seen in actuality that that's true, but everybody will say that. Like, no, it's kind of don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah.
But it's nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, I mean, I haven't had that many partners, and the ones that I've had haven't been with anybody, so I haven't really had to deal with it on my side, but I've certainly seen it, you know, on Whit's side, and it's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's sort of like advanced level stuff. Like I think people who get into it initially, it's like, okay, what's your business, what you do at home, and but then I think over time, in my experience, people get to a point where it's like, no, it's on the table or it's not.
I think that's the place that we've ultimately arrived, because as I've said, when the dishonesty is on one side, everything gets like squirrel. It's like, well, he's just fucking not reaching out for a week. And then that feels kind of weird.
Yeah.
And that gets kind of like push, pull, seductory, kind of mind fuckery.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of not cool in our relationship too.
Right.
You know, like, is this dude like cool, or is he playing games? Like, what's the deal? Well, he's not necessarily intentionally playing games, but he just got back with his girl, and his girl's fucking got his eye on the phone, and he's trying to like, and it's just this whole fucking stupid thing, even though he's said, no, it's don't ask, don't tell, everything's cool. It's not fucking cool.
Right.
You know, he's lying on both sides.
Yeah.
And so that's ultimately, I think we're both at a place now where it's got to be wide the fuck open, because in our relationship, we've gotten to this place of impeccable honesty, like where we have to know. Yeah. Like, I mean, I would love it if I got turned on by like stories of her having sex with people, but it actually just makes my stomach turn. It makes me want to vomit for the most part. But what I do like knowing is like knowing why she likes him. Like, I really like to understand from her perspective, like, what are you doing that? What are you getting out of it? Where are you from? Because when I see her and I understand her, then it makes total sense, and I'm not stressed. I'm not fabricating in my mind, oh, it's because he's got that fucking 14-inch hammer. I know he does. And that's why it's like most of the time it's like, no, he's a nice guy and we have fun. And it's like really simple. It's like, but if I don't understand that, it's like fucking for sure the 14-inch hammer. Like, I know. And I'm inspecting for damage done by the hammer. Like, did everything explode down there? Because I don't understand it. He must have the fucking hammer of Thor that he's bringing. You know, so the imagination ends up making it way worse than just seeing from her perspective, oh, I dig him because he's like that.
Yeah.
And maybe he is good in bed. And I was like, oh, cool. You know, but it's the imagination is always way fucking worse.
Isn't it funny how we, like, men get all hung up on dicks?
Yeah.
You know, it gets back to that gangbang thing. Like, you know, here we are, a couple of straight dudes. We're watching like 5 dudes and a woman. Like, what is wrong with us? Like, we're obviously dick obsessed in some weird straight way. And yeah, I mean, I try to say to guys who get hung up on dicks, like, I think, now, of course, women who are listening to this, you know, some of them will say, you're full of shit, man. There are size queens who are women. Not a lot, though. I think most size queens.
There's almost like a MVD, like a minimum viable dick.
Right. Yeah. As long as it, like,
you're like, if you cross the MVD threshold.
It's like that thing, like, you can't ride the roller coaster if you're not at least this tall. So, and it's a pretty low bar.
You can't really ride the pussy unless it takes at least this big. But if it is,
right, then you're in.
Yeah.
And if it isn't, like, are you really good at going down on a woman?
For sure.
Because if you are, then you're still in the game.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, but, you know, I often think, like, breasts. It's like, yeah, there's some guys who are just, like, you know, obsessed with big breasts. But most guys are like, whatever, she's beautiful.
Yeah.
Small breasts, medium breasts, larger breasts, whatever. I like them all. You know what I mean? As long as the woman's beautiful, that's not a major consideration.
Yeah.
And, but I think it's hard for men to flip that way of thinking into women. And I think that's basically how women think about guys, is like, is he a nice guy? If he's a nice guy, like, I don't give a fuck.
We've reduced the act of sex to penetration.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we think. Like, and it's way more. Sex starts the moment you start fucking talking and have a glass of wine and you're smiling and flirting and you have your hand on your leg, and then the kissing, and then the fucking whole experience to the cuddle and the back scratch at the end or whatever.
Whole experience?
The fucking
Is there
whole
a W
experience.
in that or not, man? Sorry, I don't know what your audience is expecting
both.
here. This is getting out of control.
But yeah, and I think for a woman, I think intuitively that is way more an understanding, because they don't have those kind of hangups. But for a guy, it's like, you know, it's just all about the fucking penetration. And that's
First time I was with a woman in Spain, Spanish woman, she looked at my dick and she said, "Oh, I've never been with a circus-sized man before."
a circus-sized? She meant circumcised. But you were like,
but for a minute, I'm like,
is this-
am I the midget or the elephant?
midget or giant?
What kind of circus is this anyway?
Are you saying it's a donkey dick?
Yeah.
So I hope so.
No, it's funny because, like, you know, based on my research, I probably know more about dicks than any straight guy around. So if a woman's like, "Oh, it's big," like, baby, I know exactly where it falls on the spectrum. Believe me.
Listen, I
Not
got
only
science behind
of
it.
humans, of bonobos, of gorillas. Come on.
It is funny looking at the stats of nationalities and dick sizes. You know, there's quite a range from 4 inches on the kind of Indian continent to like 7 inches on the African continent as just being the fucking average.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a significant difference.
And it shows up in the way condoms are produced, right? Because if they use African-sized condoms in India, they slip off everywhere. Seriously. So it's not... Have you seen Stanhope's latest? Well, there's 30 minutes on, like, Indian gang rape. It's incredible. It's incredible. He's
30 minutes of Indian gang rape comedy. Wow.
He's good. He's that good.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is very curious. Would not have expected that. That's fucking interesting. What's up with your book, man?
Which one?
You Civilized to Death.
Oh, I sent it to the publisher 2 weeks ago.
Hallelujah.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what the publisher says. Because the publisher might be like, "Yeah, we need another chapter. You got to,"
Yeah.
you never know. But yeah, I sent it in, and Ryan and I were talking earlier. Part of it was like 5 years I was fucking around working on it and then not working on it. And part of the delay, I realize now, in addition to just me being an undisciplined, scatterbrain, is that I think as I was working on it, I was doing the podcast, and the podcast was taking off and becoming a more important part of my life. So of course it displaced time and all that, but it was also that I'm excited by podcasting as a way of disseminating information.
Yeah.
And the book felt like an antiquated medium.
Yeah.
And so it just felt like, what a weird way to convey information now. Sit down and do all this work, make something in its final state, put it out, and then new science comes, new ideas come to you, you change your mind about things. Too bad, the book's already out.
Mm-hmm.
It's done. It's gone. It's out there in the world. And also fewer and fewer people are reading. More and more people are getting their information listening, while they're at work, while they're driving, whatever. And like my life was sort of transitioning from writing into podcasting, but the book was like, I got the contract, got to finish it,
Yeah.
So I'm happy with the book, and I think it's important. And I do think there are things that books can do that podcasts can't, of course.
It's like a master aggregation of knowledge around a topic, though. Like if I was going to, it would have taken the accumulation of 40, 50 podcasts to cover all the niche topics in the book that I published.
Right.
But instead now we get, all right, let's put it all together.
Yeah.
So if people want everything on that theme, they can just fucking go.
Well, see,
deep
what I'm
into
doing
that.
now is I'm putting together thematically organized books that are taken from the podcast. So I do it all with the audience. So I've got people from the audience who are coordinating. Right now, we're working on one on consciousness and drugs, and another on sexuality, and then later there will be a travel one and alternative lifestyles, and I don't remember
That's
all
cool.
the different themes. Yeah. So we'll take the information, and then the audience members are doing the transcriptions. They're picking which episodes that they want to include, which parts of the conversation are most important to include. It's all just crowdsourced.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then we do like a profit sharing thing. So we'll see how it works out, but I'm pretty happy with the way of, taking the raw content from the podcast and turning it into other mediums. Only ebooks, though, I think.
Mm-hmm. I think, Tim Ferriss has done a pretty good job of that, basically turning his podcast and a lot of these interviews into aggregations of, topics around entrepreneurship or success or motivation or something like that. And I think that's that's an intelligent way to kind of go about it. For me, I kind of feel like the podcast is the testing ground for all the ideas, where I'm learning and talking and testing and feeling it out. And then ultimately, when I get to a level of comfort on that, then it's like, okay, go to the cave, write the book, put that all together, and then go out and start exploring something else, figuring it out, testing, talking, getting feedback.
It's a great way to get access to people.
Some of these conversations are the best conversations you'll ever have.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, these days, like when else do you sit down with somebody for an hour or two, turn off your phones and just look at each other and talk? It doesn't happen very much.
And you know what I find is like when you have that relationship on the podcast, like you'll carry on with the conversation. You know, if you're used to that, then you're able to just carry on that conversation out to lunch or out to dinner or out to whatever. It'll continue. And there's been so many times where I finish a podcast, that's happened this weekend, finish a podcast, go out and grab a bite, and it's like, fuck, I wish this was still recording.
Yeah.
You know, because the conversation is still, you kind of prime that engine.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, why would you look at your phone? You know, this has been such a positive experience. Like, fuck the phone. Get to that later. And I think, but it's this initial impetus to do it. So I mean, I think that's probably a reason for anybody to start a podcast. Like, it's hard to be successful as a podcaster now just because there's a million.
Yeah.
But you will have great conversations, and that skill of having great conversations will help you in life in general.
Yeah. My advice to people who want to start a podcast is be friends with Joe and Duncan. That's the key to success, I think.
Yeah, that helps a lot. No doubt about it. I think someone was saying, I think Jordan Harbinger was saying that 95% of podcasts quit before episode 13.
Huh.
So it's like, because you don't get the downloads and then you get frustrated. So if you do it, you have to do it for the art of the podcast itself. You can't use that external validation of like how many downloads you get to do it. You just say, I'm going to have a great conversation. It's going to be recorded. I'm going to put it out. Hopefully some people dig it. And as long as you're doing it for that, you're doing it for the right reason.
Yeah.
But I think we're trained, you know, you make a post and then you want to see how many likes you get, and that determines how good the post is or anything.
Yeah,
it's all this external validation.
everybody, you know, when you're doing something creative, audience is important. Audience engagement is gratifying and makes you feel that you're having some effect. I mean, I had a weird experience where, I don't know if this happened with you. Are you on Libsyn?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I was.
You were.
Yeah,
Maybe that's what happened. So
where it dropped.
Yeah.
All the stats like dropped in a fucking, dropped by like,
well, it was going
300%.
So in my case, it was going up like fast. So it was a year and a half or 2 years ago or something. You know, my numbers were sort of, you know, hovering around the same monthly or weekly or whatever. And then it just started going up like 10% a week, 10% up. And I was like, holy shit, man, my audience is exploding. And then I get this email from Libsyn like, yeah, we're changing the way we measure downloads. You know, I don't know, they're bots. I don't remember what the fuck it was.
And they said they had some like real low ball. It might affect it like 25%.
Yeah, but it shouldn't affect any. It shouldn't be a problem. And it's like, what? Like,
it's like a third.
Yeah. Like, boom. And it had no effect on like how many people were supporting me on Patreon or using my Amazon affiliate thing, which is how I monetize it. So it didn't really have any concrete effect on me at all. But just looking at it and seeing a number that was a third lower than it was last month, kind of a bummer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's,
but it's all bullshit.
It's all bullshit. It's all total bullshit.
It's like a millionaire who loses money on the stock market. But you're still living in your fucking mansion.
It's even different because at least there was an actual loss. This was just an algorithm that was feeding our ego to a certain way with this idea of success.
But was there an actual loss? I mean, if it doesn't affect your lifestyle at all, and it's just the numbers on your bank account are different now, is that a loss?
I mean, it depends on how you measure it, but there was actual money that goes away. In this case, there was nothing that went away. The same amount of people were listening.
Yeah.
The way they just captured the data was different. And all of us were walking around like kicking rocks and like, and I talked to a bunch of people during that period and I was like,
fuck Libsyn.
Yeah, fuck Libsyn.
Lie to me, bitch.
Yeah, I'm going somewhere else. You know, like, seriously, and we did.
Seriously. Well, I almost did. I was too lazy. I figured, Yeah. Yeah. So anyway,
And
podcasting,
so is that
the trials and
I mean, that is
tribulations.
one of the things, this instant feedback from everything. I mean, it's got to be one of the things that, I don't know if you touch on it in your new book, about one of the factors of the technologization, or whatever you want to call it, of our lives, where everything we do has this kind of social feedback, where we're getting hearts on everything we push out, whether it's likes or whether it's hearts or whether it's downloads or whether it's whatever it is. Like, that is a fucking majorly different factor
Yeah.
than people were used to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder how generational it is, because I was in my, I was in my 30s when the internet started, So like my personality and brain, cognitive function and all that developed in the absence of all this. So I really wonder sometime what it's like for kids who grew up with this as part of their experience from a really young age. Because I felt, so Sex at Dawn came out in 2010, and my editor at the time was like, dude, you gotta get on Twitter. And I said, fuck, I hate Twitter. I hate the word Twitter and the little bird and tweets. Fuck that. It's all this cutie bullshit. I hate that. I don't like birthday cards. I don't like holidays. Like, I don't like anything that's trying to be cute.
He's a mean one.
I'm a fucking Grinch, man, a grumpy old fuck. But he's like, no, you got to do it. It's blah, 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 audience and so I did. I pulled out of Facebook. I draw the line at Facebook. But yeah, I'm on Twitter and Instagram. I use them a lot, and it is. I can feel it. There's a hook deep in my psyche.
Totally.
Yeah. And every once in a while, I'll go in the van and I'll be like, I'm out of range for 5 days, just to sort of do a cleanse. It's like intermittent fasting or something.
A technology cleanse. And I've heard people use that exact language, or like a fucking social media cleanse.
Yeah.
Where like actually getting yourself free of that.
Yeah.
Because it can be very positive. It's a great way to put out the message that you want. But you have to be disciplined enough not to allow the pressure of conformity to what people like to dictate entirely. Like, good to get feedback, but I think the issue is when you're trying to figure out who you are and you're just throwing shit out to the mass public, and the mass public is informing you on what you should be.
Right.
Well, every girl's going to be naked.
Right.
For sure, because that's what's going to get the right response, right? Like, and it's just going to create the same homogenous sludge, where those outliers, where the ability to go out and be out front and do something that's a little weird, that you're only called brilliant like 10 years after you've been doing that weird thing. I feel like the pressure will be to grind that down to a certain degree.
Yeah. Well, that's why I say I wonder how it's different, because I became who I am before I got any sort of feedback.
Yeah.
That way, from my immediate friends, of course, and family and stuff, but not from fucking strangers. You're right. That feedback loop is a very strange one.
Yeah. And it can be positive. Like, a lot of times the criticism is legit. Like, if you're being a dick and someone calls you a dick, it can be like, oh yeah, he's probably right. So sometimes you can take that criticism constructively, but sometimes, it's nonsense. Sometimes it's like, you're a fucking beta cuck. Okay, you're not right.
And who are you?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
yeah.
Okay, but if we were, of a more sensitive constitution, right? And maybe that would be like, oh man, I better not talk about what I really feel about relationship, because everybody's going to just call me a beta cuck, and then it just keep you. And again, it's another one of those ways that we would just get smaller and smaller and hate ourselves more, because we're not expressing our authentic swing, as Pressfield would say, like really just being who we truly are.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting how, in real life, if you told me I was being a dick, I'd take it seriously, because I know you and I value your intelligence and all that. Right.
Yeah.
But if I was walking down the street and some guy drove by in a car and said, "You're a dick," I'd be like, wrong dude, like, you don't know me. It would mean nothing. But on social media, that random dude, his voice matters.
Yeah.
You get a fucking tweet from some guy telling you you're a dick. You're like, oh, it registers in your day somehow. Like,
yeah.
Why? I don't know you. Who the fuck are you?
Right. And it's always their story. Like no one ever watches the same movie. And that's like a really important thing to remember.
Right.
Like no matter if you're in the theater with 200 people, no one's watching the same fucking movie.
You ever seen Rashomon?
No.
It's a movie about that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Just how everybody's perception is viewing things immediately, even with the viewing, with their own biases and their own personal history and everything. So what they're actually experiencing is vastly different.
Yeah.
And what anybody is going to experience from what you say or what you post is vastly different. And there's going to be a wide spectrum of ways that people are going to perceive that.
Well, I don't know how you're dealing with your responses to your book, which I guess is doing well, right?
Yeah,
I see
super
on
well.
Amazon. Sometimes when I go look on Sex at Dawn, I see it's paired with yours.
Oh,
That's nice.
nice.
I'm happy about that.
I like that.
But yeah, I sort of I'm an old hand at this now, and I recognized early on that people have a response to the book that doesn't fucking involve me. You know?
Yep.
So even when they're really complimentary, it's like, that's great, but that's between you and the book.
Yeah. I mean, whenever, especially when you touch on emotional things. So probably the most controversial part of my book is an honest exploration of nicotine, right? Where I say, okay, let's all admit that cigarettes fucking kill you and it's stupid to smoke cigarettes. Let's get that out of the way. Let's also admit that nicotine is addictive. Let's get that out of the way. Then let's talk about the 41 double-blind placebo-controlled studies that showed that nicotine improves a variety of different measures of performance, from focus to short-term memory to long-term memory to fostering alpha state, helping people get in the zone. Let's analyze that. Let's look at what the Royal London College of Physicians said, that taking smokeless tobacco is 10 to 1,000 times less dangerous than smoking cigarettes. So let's look at risk management to get the benefit that's clearly there in these 41 studies from the nicotine, and let's do it in a way that's going to cause the least amount of harm. Being mindful of addiction, being mindful of these other things. And I try to put like a really reasonable argument out there. And then, of course, some people who probably have a reason that they have some nicotine, maybe say had a family member who died of lung cancer or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, they'll come out and 1 out of every 20 reviews on the book is like, he promotes nicotine, you know, fucking idiot, or like 1 star, or like health guru talking about nicotine, 0 stars. Like they would give me negative 100 stars if they could, you know? And it's just not actually engaging with the content and being like, oh, wow, that's an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah.
You know, but it's just that first emotional reaction, and they're just like shit on it.
That's funny. Like Casilda has, my wife is a psychiatrist. She's often said that to me. She has a lot of very unpopular insights into things that in the 20 years I've been with her, I've seen society come to accept. You know, like the first time we came to America, she's like, what is all this non-fat shit? This is all bullshit. Fat's good. This is all bullshit. And this was still back in the day when most people believed
low fat, heart healthy.
Yeah, exactly. And she's just like, no, they're all wrong. They're killing themselves. This is ridiculous. And she's that way about nicotine too. She's like, no, cigarettes are really important for people who have psychotic tendencies. They self-medicate with nicotine, and it holds their focus. It keeps them in the here and now.
Yeah.
And she's like, hey, she never would tell. She worked with psychotics, and she's like, I would never tell them to stop smoking. That's the worst advice you can give them.
Right.
Lung cancer is not what they're worried about.
And then at that, when you understand that the nicotine's there, then say, okay, well, maybe try vaping. You know, like maybe try something.
Now that
that's
there are
a
other
little
options.
Now that there's other options, let's try another way to get you that same feeling with doing the minimum amount of damage.
Yeah.
And then that's just like a reasonable conversation to have. But that's probably the most emotionally charged topic. I do talk a lot about fats, but people have kind of given up that fight.
Yeah.
You know, that was a
That
fight
one's
from
over. Yeah.
5-10 years ago. I mean, still people don't get it. You know, we'll still find people who are afraid of eating fat because they still think somehow magically they're different. And if they eat fat in food, it's going to translate immediately to fat on their body.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just this thing that they can't quite get out of their head.
You know, the big one for me now that I hope society is finally coming around to it, but I've been arguing it for 20 years or more, is this idea that everybody died young in the hunter-gatherer times, pre-agricultural times. That, you know, we only lived to 35, so of course, you know, our backs aren't designed to last 70 years. That's why we have back problems. And you know, that's why we're all getting our knees replaced, because those knees, they're only designed to last 35 years. That is bullshit, people. Even if Dr. Phil told you that. It's bullshit. Humans live into their 70s.
Mm.
Babies die. Lots of babies died in hunter-gatherer times. And
So
that's,
if you average it out.
you average it out, you get 35 or 40. But that doesn't mean that anyone has ever been old at 35 or 40. No
Yeah.
human being, you know.
Because you do get that. Well, no one lived past 30.
And
or no one
everyone's
lived
so
past 40.
sure of themselves when they say it, and they're all fucking
And everybody's
wrong.
like, so aren't things grand now? Nobody lived past 40 back then.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no matter how bad things are now, you have to admit we doubled the human lifespan, and that you can't take that away. Oh yeah, yeah, you can.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can.
You can take that away.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a big thing. I really bang that drum in Civilized to Death. It's we talk about it in Sex at Dawn, but that was like Sex at Dawn, to be honest, was largely about sexuality, but I was also using the sexuality to hold attention so I could slip some other shit in there.
Mhm.
You know, it's like giving a dog a pill, you know?
Mhm.
And so we talked about the violence in prehistory and you know, health and nutrition and a lot of other things that
You know, our favorite cereal maker just being a
Kellogg.
total asshole.
Jeez, yeah.
Tell people about Kellogg if they haven't read the book.
So Kellogg, I think John Harvey Kellogg, I think, was one of the two brothers. They ran a sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan. And
Sounds like a horror movie already.
yeah, well, so John Harvey Kellogg this, I guess, is the 19 teens and 20s, was the leading sex educator in America. And at the time, the major problem, this is before the war on drugs, there was a war on masturbation.
Yep.
People believed that
For sure.
masturbation could literally kill you, that if you masturbated, it had toxic effect on your nervous system, would lead to insanity and actually dissolved the nerves in your brain and caused all sorts of terrible problems. So this guy, John Harvey Kellogg, wrote a book, I forget what it's called, like The Education and Training of the Youth or something like that. It was a bestseller. And in that book, he said that if your son touched himself inappropriately, what he recommended was that doctors sew the foreskin closed on the little boy's penis using metal sutures, and that it was best to do this without any anesthesia. So with a needle and metal thread, sew the foreskin closed so that when he got erections at night, it would be excruciatingly painful. And that would teach him not to touch himself. And as far as little girls who touch themselves inappropriately, he recommended strapping them down and pouring carbolic acid directly onto the clitoris.
That's like a fucking Batman villain. That's like Batman villain level.
Yeah.
And
That's a best sound. That was the Dr. Phil of his day.
yeah. And people are still eating cereal with this fucking name on it.
Yeah.
You know,
Cereal.
it would be like fucking
Yeah.
Hitler's jumbo hot dogs.
Right.
You know, like what? No, we're not eating Hitler's jumbo hot dogs. Like, no, we're not doing that. Sorry. It's fucking, I'm going with ballpark. I'm not going with fucking, I'm not going with fucking Adolf.
kosher.
Yeah. I'm not going with Adolf's fucking bratwurst. No, Adolf's bratwurst is not fucking gonna be for sale here.
If Stanhope were here, he'd be going nuts. I'm not going to say the things that Stanhope would be saying. Yeah, it is like that. And it's also, there's another layer to it, which is that cereal that's being sold to kids, your Kellogg Sugar Smacks and Captain whatever the fuck, Captain Crunch and all that, is still child abuse.
Yeah. True.
It's fucking sugar and chemicals being sold as, vitamin fortified bullshit, making kids crazy and unhealthy and type 2 diabetes at 6 years old. So
Yep.
Kellogg is a fucking
and
scourge.
not provide all that low fat, providing none of the substrate for the natural hormones
Right.
that you actually need to have a healthy
Right.
functioning hormonal system. It's like,
It's just all.
it's the whole, and wasn't he also like getting like fucking daily enemas by some young man, like
Yeah.
shoving a fucking hose up his ass every day?
Right. And
for help?
he bragged about never having had sex with his wife. Ever.
Yeah.
He wrote that book about torturing kids on his honeymoon where he was not fucking his wife. So this gets to another sort of overriding theory I have. which I might develop into a book at some point, or maybe I'll just keep yammering about it on podcasts, which is so much easier. I feel like, and I got into this a little bit in Civilized to Death. Civilization, from my perspective, Western civilization is a pathological social structure. We are destroying the planet we live on. We're destroying each other. We do all this crazy shit to, hurt kids and send people off to wars they don't understand. And, the majority of our resources are going into building these supersonic fighter jets that for wars that are never going to happen. Because, how is the Soviet Union or Russia attacking us now? Well, they've already taken over the fucking country and there were no tanks or aircraft carriers involved. I mean, there's some really interesting shit going on. And
we've never been in a war with any country that's had a McDonald's, and I fucking promise we never will. Like at the point that like we're that integrated, it's not going to happen.
Well, not a shooting war, because shooting wars don't make sense anymore.
No, it doesn't make sense
Why
anymore.
would you want, who wants our land? What they want is our resources. So if you can take over the business and the business can take over the government, which it's already done, then there's no need to send a fucking army anywhere. Like, what's the point of that? Anyway, if you start from this premise that Western civilization is essentially a pathological social system, and you look at what individuals rise to positions of prominence within that system, you would expect that they will be individuals who embody the pathological principles of the system. So, in other words, Harvey Weinstein, Donald Trump. What politician is a cool dude?
Yeah.
If you're a cool
I haven't
dude,
really met a lot
you
of them.
don't really want to be in a position of great
and people
leadership.
knew that even back in like the ancient times. Like you talk about like in the Roman ethos, like it was always the farmer who was done with politics. And they're like, please come back and be our general. He's like, no, I got these olive trees. And I'm fucking
I'm done
happy
with
here.
that.
I'm done with that. And it's same with like George Washington. Like, hey man, like we need you. Like, please, like, you sure?
Yeah.
And it's this
and then
kind
he's
of call,
out.
and then it's this call to service. Like, okay,
Right.
here I am. I'm gonna
Reluctant leadership.
Reluctant leader. Yeah.
And it's the same, and that actually is a replication of hunter-gatherer approach to leadership. So there's a section in Civilized to Death where I talk about politics, and in hunter-gatherers, the way politics works is like that. Someone is respected, someone's in a position of leadership because they're respected. You don't go, hey, everybody, respect me. If you're that kind of person, everyone just thinks you're pathetic and ridiculous. So it's the opposite of being a leader. You're considered a loser. So it's everything's become flipped around, where we have these people who rise to positions of prominence who embody the nightmare, right? So, I mean, there are exceptions. You're doing really well, but you're also a very thoughtful person, right? It's doing well. That's exceptional. I think Obama was a smart, cool guy who somehow ended up being president. We can argue about, his policies and all that, but I think I'd have a good time having dinner with Obama.
Sure. I could hoop it up with him.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed
for
in a lot of the shit he did.
Like,
But
so of course. But like, you look at his wife and his kids, they're legit people and they love the dude. So he's not an asshole.
Right.
You know?
He should have just legalized weed. He could have just fucking gone out.
Dude, there are a
just
lot of things he should have done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. But anyways.
But anyway, my point is that most of the people who are driven to succeed are fucked up. I'm very deeply suspicious of ambition. Because if you are healthy, you get to a point where you're like, I got friends, I got a nice place to live, I got food, I can travel. I'm done. Why am I going to get up and go to work 7 days a week? Fuck that.
You know what I've actually seen the most of is I've seen that typically there's some kind of traumatic incident that happened, that they're kind of some way that they've needed to prove themselves and prove themselves worthy of love, some parents shit, some other shit.
Right.
But the thing that I'm encouraged about, and it's probably a microcosm because I'm interacting with these people, and if I'm interacting with them, they have to at least have their mind a little bit open, but like through psychedelics and through other things, a lot of the trauma is starting to be kind of worked through. And as the trauma and these people are worked through, they have these big ass platforms. And then they're starting to open their heart, and then they're starting to reflect on their ego. And so I'm hopeful that as we start to infiltrate into these structures and these people start to realize like, oh, wow, I got this way being a dick, trying to prove to my dad who beat me with a fucking stick every day and moved around in the military that I was actually worth something. That's why I did it. And this mad rush to power was what made me. But now I'm waking up to that and I'm actually forgiving my father and I'm actually loving people. And holy shit, I got all these resources. What am I going to do with them now?
Right.
And I think hopefully that's the place that we get to, so that these people with this aggregation of resources, we can switch them on, then, well, maybe we'll start to do some good, and maybe we'll start to actually do probably the only thing that civilization was really helpful for. And I think like the final purpose of humanity is to preserve us and the planet to help smooth out the cataclysmic nature of Earth. Right? Like that's what we should be directing our efforts towards, to like creating time capsules in places. Because every fucking 25,000, 12,000 years, whatever, the Earth shudders like a wet dog in some way, shape, or form, and everybody gets fucked up. Like what we should be doing is like, okay, let's get civilization high enough so the technology is enough that in one way or another, we can at least kind of preserve this shit or kind of mitigate that. But we're not even focused on that at all. We're still fighting each other and fucking off and making cool jets. And like, we're not really preparing for what the next shit is going to be, because the Earth is going to do what the Earth does, and it's going to fucking shake.
Yeah.
And that's like, we got to get ready for that.
You ever heard of the Fermi paradox? Enrico Fermi was the godfather of the nuclear reactor. He designed the first nuclear reactor in Chicago, I think. And then he was working on the, what was it called? The Alamo Project, the first nuclear bomb. Los Alamos was where it was. So one day he was at lunch with his physicist friends, and they were talking about the likelihood of extraterrestrial intelligent life. And he was doing some calculations on a napkin. He's like, okay, well, we know there are this many stars in the galaxy, and this many planets within an orbit that where life could exist, temperature range and light range. And we know this and we know that, and this certain percentage of them have water, we believe, and I don't know. So he did all these calculations, he ran them out, and they're, 10 to the XXXXX planets that should have life. So where is everybody, right? And you figure half of them are older than us and half of them are younger than us. So eliminate the half that are younger, but the half that are older, where are they? They should be reaching out or showing up or sending signals or something, and there's nothing. We haven't found anything. So
maybe, but
nothing that's been confirmed.
Yeah, for sure.
What, the Marfa lights? What are we talking about?
I don't know, man.
Here?
I think there's some sketchy shit that's going on. I'm not sure. I'm not like fully going to buy that they haven't reached out.
Well, nobody has said like, we're here.
For sure. For sure.
So the Fermi paradox is, where is everybody? And the answers, the most popular answer, because, Elon Musk has thought about this, and Bill Gates, and, all these, the kind of people you're talking about who maybe will get their shit together and help us. A lot of them have talked about this, and some of them think that there's what they call the great filter, which is that there's something inherent in technological development where the technology advances faster than the intelligence of the species.
Than the consciousness,
so it gets too far out ahead, and we blow ourselves up. We destroy the planet. We have all these nuclear weapons. Eventually, some of them are going to go off. Something's going to go wrong. We contaminate, or we do this DNA, fucking around with the DNA, CRISPR, and we create a pandemic or whatever. So within this sequence, there's like a time bomb that goes off before anyone can reach out. So
it's interesting. I mean, we've certainly seen that. We've certainly seen technology advance our level of consciousness and compassion.
Sure.
And if that is a universal law, I sometimes look at it though, and I'm like, but what if there wasn't these forces that retarded the ability for us to grow in spirit and compassion? Like there's been these large oppressive forces like capital R religion, for example, like suppressing genuine spirituality, like genuine recognition of ourself as other and others as self, and creating all of this kind of conflict and suppressing science and actually suppressing philosophy in a lot of ways. Like, would we have been different, or is this? But then maybe that's always what develops. Maybe people always hijack fear systems and guilt systems. And if you did this a million times, these religions would have developed the same way and the technology would have developed the same way. It's fucking interesting to think about.
Well, I came up with a new answer to the Fermi paradox, and that's in Civilized to Death.
Nice.
And since it's my habit of saying shit that I should not say and just, and get people to go buy the book. But hey, by the time it comes out, you will have forgotten this anyway. Let's be honest. I'm, desperately trying to look for a upbeat way to end the book, right? So what I came up with was, because it sells better, got to get it out before Armageddon. The thing I came up with is, you ever read Joseph Campbell, A Hero with a Thousand Faces, right? So Jung talks about this, and Campbell wrote about it. This idea of the hero that goes out on the journey. All the stories are the same in every society. The hero, the young man or woman goes out on this journey. They have these experiences of growth and insight and challenges and all that. And they're looking for something, right? They're trying to find the Holy Grail, or they're trying to find whatever it is. And they don't find it, but they end up going home. And when they get home, they realize that what they were looking for was there all along, but they couldn't see it because they hadn't had those experiences, right? So that's sort of the basic
Classic hero's
central
journey.
classic story, right? So I applied that to civilization. And so what if civilization is the hero's journey? What if that's what Western civilization was? What if we got to a point now, and it feels like it's ending now, right? It feels like there's a big turn.
We're approaching,
happening.
I think it would be approach of the inmost cave. Like, we're in the shadow right now.
Right.
Or we're having to face our
Or
shit,
if you
face
think of
the
it
structures.
as a journey, it's like this is the point where we're furthest from home and we're
Yep.
turning back now.
Yeah.
Because look at what's happening in medicine, in diet, in exercise. Like, a lot of the stuff you wrote about in your book is about returning to a primordial way of living. Communication with our partners, our sexuality. Sex at Dawn's about, let's look at sexuality from a prism of the way we evolved. Darwinian medicine, paleo diet, CrossFit. All these things are saying, okay, how did we evolve? How did this species evolve? And let's look at that as a way to figure out the ideal way to live now, right? Try to integrate that into our modern lives. All these things are doing that. And I think that the reason for that is that we understand that the best place for us to be is where we came from. And so the Fermi paradox gets explained for me by saying, a lot of them blew themselves up, but a lot of them probably got to this point, roughly where we are now, where they said, there's nothing out there. This is where we evolved. This is our home. Let's stay here and figure this shit out and take care of the planet and anticipate the cataclysms and try to preserve this fucking paradise. Because there won't ever be another paradise. Just like, a dog yearns to run with the wolves, right? There's a reason for that, because that's where we came from. So that's my explanation for the Fermi paradox, that maybe all this struggle was for us to reach a point where we could take some of these pieces of technology and return to essentially a primordial existence, but with solar energy and, some other birth control technology and so on.
I fucking love it. Give me a hug. Let's end this podcast. Yeah. That's fucking amazing. For real. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm not the guy you're going to look to for hopefulness, but
you did it though.
I did it. Occasionally, I'll surprise you.
Everybody, read Sex at Dawn. We'll look out for his new book, Civilized to Death. Still called that?
Still called that.
Still called that. And fucking listen to Tangentially Speaking. Still called that?
Still called that.
Okay, cool.
Thanks,
and,
man.
follow him on fucking everything but Facebook.
Exactly.